dogs are talking. Let 'em talk.
Welcome to another VO radio show, a bite-sized version. I'm Andrew Peters, and up in Sydney is
Robbo. How are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. How you going?
Good. Yeah, really good, thanks.
Shaky start there, shaky start. Now, this week we'll talk about monitoring, and the reason I wanted to talk about it is because I'd never really thought about it before. But a week or so back, I had to make up a list of music for a forthcoming event. And so I was in the studio and just cutting music together for a playlist so I could play music all night. And of course, while I'm doing that, I'm listening to the music through reference monitors, which I never do. And I've just realised how accurate reference monitors are.
Yeah.
You hear a song you've heard a gazillion times through hi-fi speakers, and then you run them through a reference monitors, and you're just like, what? I haven't heard that before.
Yeah.
What's going on there?
That's the trick, isn't it? Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. It's people don't understand that. People who put up hi-fi speakers in their home studio or listen to Beats headphones when they're working or whatever don't realize perhaps that it's actually coloring the sound. They're actually designed to sound a certain way. They're not actually a flat response. So it can be quite eye-opening sitting down listening to reference monitors because it's a completely different sound. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, so if anyone hasn't tried and experimented with this thing, grab one of your favourite songs, make sure it's a good version of it, not an MP3, but a really accurate, well-mastered version of it.
Let's be old school. Let's say CD.
Let's say CD. And then play it through your reference monitors, and if they're good ones, you'll completely hear the difference. Which is, so what is the main difference between studio monitors and hi-fi speakers?
Well, I pretty much think, as we just said, that the hi-fi speakers are actually designed to sound a certain way. They're designed to be bass heavy, with a bit more high end to sort of give the vocal some more presence or whatever. I mean, it's a bit like flicking through the EQ presets on iTunes or something like that. The speakers are actually designed to have a similar response. And especially headphones. I mean, certainly you listen to, any of the big high-priced commercial brands of headphones, and what you're actually listening to is more of a coloured sound than what's actually coming off the original source material. But that's what people want, I suppose, and that's why people have a preference in terms of, be it Sony or, any of those other commercial brands when it comes to home stereo, as opposed to others. So because they just like the sound.
Yeah, you've been monitoring in headphones with this TV show.
Oh, yeah. I'm having a bit of a nightmare with that. I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I got invited to mix a TV program, but I had to go to them to do it, and they're just in a big open sort of office area, and I've just been shoved in the corner with my laptop and was mixing in headphones. And not having a pair of decent headphones to mix in, I actually went out and bought myself a pair of KRK K&S 6400s, I think they are from memory, and I can't tell you what they are because I'm wearing them. But whilst they are a flat response, I have struggled with the mix only because it's closer to your head. It gets in your head. It's a different way of listening as opposed to listening to speakers. It's also very fatiguing. By the end of the day, my ears are exhausted, for want of a better term. And I've actually had to spend I think the program's been going to air for about 6 weeks now. It's probably taken me about 6 weeks to get it sounding right on air, purely for that reason, just because in a completely different listening environment, I actually have struggled. It hasn't sounded awful, and to the average ear listening to the TV show, they probably wouldn't even notice. But in terms of, I think more I've noticed in terms of music level, under dialogue, and sound effect and all that sort of stuff that sits under dialogue, because it's a bit more in your head. Your brain tells you it's a bit louder than it actually is, and all that sort of stuff. So I was noticing on air that the music was getting a bit lost, and sort of realised I could pump it up a bit more in the sound effect. So it's been a very interesting experiment. But in terms of monitoring in here, I actually have in here being my studio, my home studio, I have 2 lots of speakers. I actually have some passive Audio acoustics that are my main monitors. And then I have a little pair of Fostex that I use as a reference. So it's kind of interesting talking about the difference in monitors, the difference even in the sound between those two. The Fostex are a lot smaller, although they seem to have a lot more top end than the bigger ones underneath. So I sort of try to fit what I found is I just try to listen to my mixes on as many sources as possible. And if they all sound reasonably the same, then I'm fairly confident that I'm happy with where everything's sitting. So I do have a little pair of desktop, just cheapy computer speakers that I also reference sort of just as a final reference. I'll listen down to something, or if it's a TV program, I'll just flick through it and have a listen to make sure that it's all sitting in the right place and go from there. But it is a minefield when you start talking about monitoring in home studios or any studio.
That's why we did that experiment with George Whittam about a month ago, where I sent off a file from here for him to listen to, and he actually gives you the chart of his hearing test, so you kind of go, okay, well, his hearing's perfect. So that was good for me because it gave me an idea that, okay, what he was hearing, he said was fine. So now I know when I'm listening through my monitors in the studio that what I'm hearing, which I've always heard, is fine. If I start hearing something that's not the same, then I know there's going to be an issue somewhere. Yeah. Which is kind of handy. At least you've got a reference, and that's the whole thing about studio monitors is having a reference that you can trust.
That's right. Look, and I think the thing is, for the people who are listening to this podcast, they're probably not people like me who are going to be sitting at home mixing stuff. They're going to be more people like you who are sitting at home recording stuff and then sending it out. Yeah. I think once you've got yourself set up in a place that everyone's happy with what you're sending them and you're not getting people going, it's a bit too sibilant, it's a bit too this, it's a bit too that, don't screw with it. Just let it sit.
Absolutely.
And put it out. But, people like you who, can't walk into a music store without buying 6 new microphones, so it's a little different.
Not anymore. I've got too many. I'm now selling.
You're slogging them off. Watch out for the fire sale, folks.
There's no fire and there's no sale. No, it's interesting though. And the monitors I picked up, they were ones that we used. I saw in a lot of studios at probably 10 years ago, but I don't see them so much anymore. Yeah. Mainly Genelecs you see and...
Genelec's a big one.
Yeah, they're the main monitors I see. But
it's probably about time for me to update my passive ones because they're about 15 years old. So I don't know. There's just something about passive speakers that I like. I don't know what it is, but so I'll probably stick with passive. Even though the amp's got to sit outside the room and there's ugly cables that run around the corner of the room to get to the speakers, there's just something about them that I do like, and I think. Especially now having one passive and one active pair of speakers in the studio, I kind of do like listening to the difference between the two of them, and just give a bit like you, I suppose. It gives me that extra bit of confidence that when it does get to Joe Bloggs at home listening on his fancy schmancy home hi-fi speakers, that it is going to sound very schmick.
Absolutely, yes. Well, mine are not passive; they're active speakers, and I like them. I like them a lot. I did actually sell my amplifier a while ago to somebody else. In fact, I think I did a trade.
Yeah, right.
But but I do. These Yamahas are fantastic, and they're not the NS10s because they're passive anyway. But they did do an active. They did do an active version of.
Yeah, never very popular
NS10s.
Though. They never really went off. I suppose we should also explain for anybody who's not au fait with studio terms that. An active speaker is one that doesn't require an amplifier. They've got amplifiers built in, and passive, you actually need an external amplifier to make them work. So for those of you who, probably one or two of you who didn't know that, there you go, you've learned something today.
Including, me as well probably. Yeah. But I don't know.
Dear. If you're passive, you're sitting on the couch, and if you're active, you're out going for a run with the dog, right? That's your idea of passive and active.
Yeah, well, there's passive and active speakers, and there's passive and active actors, or passive and active workers. And I'm being a passive worker at the moment, sitting in here.
Although I heard you saying before we started recording, you were being summoned for a cup of tea, so life's not too bad.
That's right. Would you like a cup of tea? Oh, look. Hope there's a biscuit.
I'm moving to Melbourne.
Cup of tea and a biscuit in the afternoon. Gotta love that.
Beautiful. We'll go and enjoy the Scotch finger, and I'll talk to I should be careful when I say that, shouldn't I?
Yes. I'm sure anybody outside of Australia is going, oh, right.
Oh, really? Right.
Someone's been giving someone the Scotch finger. But,
Enjoy the Oreo and the cup of tea.
yeah, I will do.
The VO Radio Show is produced in the studios of Voodoo Sound. To polish your next audio production, check us out at voodoo-sound.com. Find professional voices simply all in one place. Realtimecasting.com, including me.